Welcome to the Deep Dive. Today we're navigating the historical sources surrounding a day that really changed everything. September 11, 2001. It's a date everyone remembers, of course, but the deeper layers, the facts, the motivations, the impacts, it's often less explored. So our goal today is to go deep into those sources, pulling out the most important bits of knowledge and insight for you. We want to give you a really solid understanding of this pivotal event, from how it happened right through to the global repercussions. We'll connect the dots, highlight some maybe surprising facts, so you get a truly well-informed perspective. Let's start with how fast it all happened that day. The timeline is just staggering. On that Tuesday morning, 19 hijackers took control of 4 commercial planes. American Airlines Flight 11 was first. It hit the North Tower of the World Trade Center at 8:46 a.m. Then just 17 minutes later, 9:03 a.m., United Flight 175 hit the South Tower. And both towers, these huge buildings, they collapsed within, an hour and 42 minutes?
Yeah, less than 2 hours for both. It was unprecedented. It really showed a critical vulnerability. You see, the impact from the planes, and especially those intense jet fuel fires, they basically stripped the fireproofing off the steel core.
Ah, okay.
And the steel, exposed like that, weakened incredibly quickly, much faster than engineers had, anticipated. And the hijackers, they specifically chose those big planes, the Boeing 757s and 767s, right?
Long-haul flights.
Exactly, because they carried way more fuel, so that just maximized the destructive potential, turned them into flying bombs, essentially.
And the devastation wasn't just in New York. American Airlines Flight 77 crashed into the Pentagon at 9:37 a.m., caused part of the building to collapse. And then there's the story of United Flight 93. Just incredible bravery there. Passengers found out what was happening from phone calls.
Yeah, they learned about the other attacks.
And they decided to fight back against the hijackers.
An incredible act of defiance.
It led to the plane crashing in a field near Shanksville, Pennsylvania at 10:03 a.m.
That's right. Investigators think the target was probably the U.S. Capitol, maybe the White House.
Wow.
That heroism on Flight 93, it's just, a real testament. And think about the response in the air. The FAA made this immediate, drastic call.
The ground stop.
Yeah, an indefinite ground stop for all U.S. air traffic. No more takeoffs. Everything in the air had to land or divert immediately.
It's just amazing.
It was extraordinary, and that's when Canada launched Operation Yellow Ribbon, taking in all those diverted international flights. A huge help.
The human cost, though, it's just devastating. The total number of people killed was 2,996.
Almost 3,000 people.
And in the World Trade Center towers, over 90% of those who died were at or above where the planes hit.
Right.
The North Tower. That was particularly awful. Flight 11 destroyed all 3 staircases on impact.
Escape impossible for anyone above that zone.
Yeah, like for people on the 92nd floor, all the elevator shafts were cut off, debris blocked the stairs, all 69 workers there were trapped, just sealed their fate. So as the world was just reeling from this, the question became, who did this? Who was responsible?
Well, the sources are very clear on that. It was al-Qaeda, led by Osama bin Laden.
And there were key players from this. Hamburg cell.
Yeah.
In Germany.
That's right, the Hamburg cell. It was like the European base for some key hijackers.
Yeah.
You had Mohammed Atta, Marwan al-Shehi, Ziad Jarrah, Ramzi bin al-Shibh, Said Bahaji, basically a group of radicalized guys living pretty openly in Germany. They could plan, coordinate.
Without drawing too much attention from the U.S. initially.
Exactly. Before they moved to the U.S. for the flight training part. And the main planner, the architect of the 9/11 attacks, was Khalid Sheikh Mohammed, KS.
KSM. Okay.
He admitted his role later. And what's really chilling is the family connection.
Oh, what?
He's the uncle of Ramzi Youssef.
The guy behind the 1993 World Trade Center bombing.
The very same. And actually, the 9/11 attacks were heavily influenced by an earlier plot KSM worked on called the Bujinka plot.
Bujinka plot.
Yeah.
That sounds like it might have been a sort of dry run. Tell us about that. How did it influence 9/11?
Absolutely. Bujinka was this huge, ambitious plan from the mid-90s. KSM and Ramzi Youssef again. They planned to bomb like a dozen airliners over the Pacific, assassinate the Pope, even crash a plane into CIA headquarters.
Wow. That's ambitious is one word for it.
Right. It was mostly foiled, thankfully. But the method, especially using commercial planes as weapons, that clearly stuck with KSM and shaped his vision for 9/11.
And al-Qaeda's reasons, their stated motivations, they were pretty blunt.
They were. They cited things like U.S. support for Israel, American military bases in Saudi Arabia, the sanctions against Iraq.
Osama bin Laden himself said some truly disturbing things like, we do not differentiate between those dressed in military uniforms and civilians. They are all targets in this fatwa. And America does not have a religion. that will prevent it from destroying all people. He used the term fatwa. For listeners, what does that mean here? Why was that significant for him?
Right. So a fatwa is technically a non-binding legal opinion on Islamic law, usually from a scholar. Bin Laden was essentially using this religious term, this decree, to try and justify killing civilians.
Legitimize it.
Exactly, arguing it was a defensive war, a religious duty against America. And if you connect this to the bigger picture, understanding their stated ideology is really key to grasping the strategy behind these awful acts. Bin Laden basically said all Muslims had to wage this defensive war against the U.S. to force America to change its policies.
He even mentioned something personal, didn't he? About seeing towers destroyed somewhere.
Yeah, he did. He talked about seeing demolished towers in Lebanon and how that influenced his desire to, quote, punish the oppressor in kind, to destroy towers in America so that they taste some of what we tasted. Chilling.
As we go through these reports, one of the things that really stands out is how many warnings there seem to have been beforehand. Let's dig into those cracks in the intelligence wall, things that were missed.
Yeah, tragically, there were quite a few.
Richard Clarke, senior counterterrorism official. He put domestic agencies on full alert in early July 2001, said something spectacular is going to happen here, and it's going to happen soon.
That's right. And that same month, July, there was the Phoenix memo.
Ah, yes.
From FBI agent Kenneth Williams, alerting headquarters about the possibility of a coordinated effort by Osama bin Laden to send students to the United States to attend civil aviation universities, flight schools.
Right. And wasn't there a warning from Jordan, too?
There was. The specific warning that al-Qaeda was planning an attack using airplanes. They even had a code name for it. The Big Wedding.
The Big Wedding. Wow.
Yeah.
And then, maybe the most direct one, August 6, 2001, the President's Daily Brief from the CIA, titled Bin Laden Determined to Strike in U.S.
It noted patterns of suspicious activity, consistent with preparations for hijackings or other types of impacts.
Yet, even with all that, opportunities were missed, like Zacarias Moussaoui.
Right. He raised suspicions that Minnesota flight school got arrested.
But the FBI request to search his laptop was denied. Lack of probable cause.
Exactly. That's a crucial point. And later investigations pointed to policies like the wall.
The wall?
Yeah, this policy that basically kept criminal investigators and intelligence agents separate. They couldn't easily share information. Plus, agencies like the CIA and NSA were often reluctant to reveal their, quote, sensitive sources and methods.
So this wall, it was like a legal barrier, meant to protect civil liberties, maybe, but it stopped crucial info from being shared.
Pretty much. It meant FBI agents working a criminal case couldn't just pass info to intelligence analysts, even if they were looking at the same people. Critical puzzle pieces stayed separate.
And the post-9/11 investigations really hammered this home.
They did.
A 2004 CIA internal review. It wasn't public until 2009. It criticized senior CIA officials for failing to stop two hijackers, Nawaf al-Hazmi and Khalid Lamihar, from even getting into the U.S.
Or for not sharing info about them with the FBI.
Yeah, and the Congressional Joint Inquiry in 2002.
Same story. Detailed FBI and CIA failures. How information they actually had wasn't used to stop the plots. And that inquiry also had those controversial 28 classified pages.
Right, the ones people thought might link to foreign governments. Still a point of contention for some.
Definitely.
Then the big one, the 9/11 Commission report in 2004, its conclusion was pretty damning. Failures in imagination, policy, capabilities, and management.
A systemic failure, really.
And separately, there was the NIST investigation, National Institute of Standards and Technology. They looked at the building collapses.
Right. They found the initial plane impacts blew off the fireproofing on the tower's steel structures.
Okay.
Then the fires weakened that exposed steel, and that's what led to the collapses.
They also mentioned the stairwells, didn't they?
Yeah.
Not properly reinforced for escape.
That's right. Another critical factor in the tragedy.
The immediate responses on the day itself.
It was a mix, wasn't it? Heroism, but also real challenges.
Absolutely. NORAD scrambled F-15s from Otis Air National Guard Base. They were airborne by 8:53 a.m.
But they only had 9 minutes warning for Flight 11.
And no warning for the others before they hit. Just not enough time. Some pilots even took off without live ammo, prepared to ram the hijacked planes if they had to. Incredible bravery.
And Vice President Cheney gave the shoot-down order.
He did, around 10:20 a.m., to shoot down any confirmed hijacked commercial plane. But the instructions just didn't get relayed to the fighter pilots in time.
Tragic. And on the ground in New York?
Well, NYPD officers mostly managed to evacuate because orders got through.
Okay.
But many FDNY commanders and firefighters, they never heard the evacuation orders. Radio systems failed. Different agencies couldn't communicate properly. Just heartbreaking communication breakdowns. Beyond the immediate chaos, the government activated continuity plans. What did that actually involve?
Yeah, these are top secret plans, usually for things like nuclear war.
Right.
They were activated immediately. Key government leaders were moved fast to secure secret locations. The goal was to ensure the government could keep functioning no matter what.
A stark sign of how serious the attack was.
Definitely. And the U.S. response was swift. The launch of the War on Terror.
Which led to invading Afghanistan.
Right, to overthrow the Taliban because they refused to hand over al-Qaeda.
And this War on Terror, it wasn't just military, was it? It changed foreign policy fundamentally.
Oh, completely. It marked a whole new era, moving away from state versus state conflict to this global kind of fuzzy war against non-state groups. It blurred the lines between law enforcement and military action, redefined national security threats. We're still feeling the effects today.
And NATO got involved.
Hugely significant moment. NATO invoked Article 5 of its Treaty Mutual Defense. It's the only time Article 5 has ever been invoked. Allies were called upon to fight al-Qaeda.
Wow. And Congress passed the authorization for the use of military force.
Yep, the AUMF passed September 14th, 2001. And incredibly, it's still in effect today.
Still in effect. After more than 20 years, what does that tell us about the legacy of 9/11 on U.S. foreign policy?
Well, it's a symbol of this kind of open-ended conflict, isn't it? It's basically given presidents broad power to act globally against groups they label as terrorist threats without needing traditional declarations of war against specific countries. It totally reshaped how America engages militarily around the world.
And domestically, huge changes too. The Department of Homeland Security.
Created practically overnight a massive government restructuring.
And the USA Patriot Act.
Passed very quickly.
And controversially.
Right. Civil liberties groups have always criticized it, saying it allows too much government surveillance, invades privacy, cuts down on judicial oversight.
That debate continues, absolutely.
It's interesting. On 9/11 itself, Defense Secretary Rumsfeld ordered staff to look for links to Iraq.
He did. Issued orders to find evidence of Iraqi involvement literally on the day. But the administration initially decided against attacking Iraq in response.
Initially, yes. Just 4 days after 9/11, they apparently decided against it. But later, of course.
Later, they invaded, citing Saddam Hussein's support for terrorism. A claim President Bush himself later admitted was unfounded.
Right. A very controversial decision with long-lasting consequences.
The fallout from 9/11 just kept spreading, didn't it? Health impacts, economic, societal.
Immense repercussions. Health-wise, you had hundreds of thousands of tons of toxic debris at Ground Zero.
Right. Over 2,500 contaminants, carcinogens.
Spread all over Lower Manhattan. And exposure led to terrible illnesses for Ground Zero responders. Still does.
And there was controversy about the EPA's initial statements on air quality.
Yeah, they initially gave reassurances, but later it came out that those statements were influenced by national security concerns, not purely based on the science at the time.
Economically, New York City took a massive hit.
Oh, yeah. In just the first 3 months, something like 430,000 job months lost, $2.8 billion in wages gone.
And the city's GDP dropped significantly.
By about $27.3 billion over late 2001 and 2002. Though it's important to note the federal government did provide a lot of assistance.
And the rebuilding effort, that was huge too.
Monumental. The WTC site cleanup finished by May 2002. The Pentagon was repaired within a year.
And the new World Trade Center complex. One World Trade Center opened in 2014.
That's right. Tallest building in the Western Hemisphere, 1,776 feet. Symbolic height, of course.
Of course. And the transport hubs rebuilt. But 2 World Trade Center is still unfinished, even now in 2025.
Still unfinished, yeah. Development stalled and started over the years.
Memorials became really important too.
Absolutely. The tribute in light, those twin beams, was an early, powerful symbol. Then the official National September 11 Memorial and Museum opened, with the reflecting absence pools in the tower footprints. Very moving.
And memorials at the Pentagon and for Flight 93 in Pennsylvania.
Yes, though there was controversy about placing unidentified human remains within the museum site itself, a difficult issue.
Domestically, the reaction was complex. A huge surge in blood donations, people wanting to help.
Absolutely. But also, tragically, over 3,000 children lost a parent that day.
And sadly, a rise in hate crimes.
Yes, a spike in attacks and harassment against Muslim South Asians. People perceived to be connected, like the murder of Balbir Singh Sodhi, a Sikh man mistaken for a Muslim. Just awful.
Though it's important to mention, Muslim American groups immediately condemned the attacks and offered a lot of aid and support.
Crucial point, yes. The overwhelming majority condemned it unequivocally.
Internationally, how did things shift?
Well, counterterrorism became the global focus. Many countries, Germany, Canada, the UK, they passed their first anti-terrorism laws because of 9/11.
Really? Their first ones?
Yeah, specifically framed in response to this event. There was widespread condemnation from governments globally. Iraq was a notable exception, of course.
And reports of celebrations in some Palestinian areas. Those were disputed.
Right, those reports were contentious. But Palestinian Authority President Yasser Arafat did condemn the attacks, and the UN Security Council passed Resolution 1368 condemning the attacks and stating readiness to combat terrorism. A global shift.
The war on terror.
Yeah.
The broader costs have just been astronomical.
Staggering. Those costs of war project reports from 2021, 2023, they're sobering.
Conservatively, 38 million people displaced.
At least. Between 897,000 and 929,000 direct deaths in the conflict zones.
Direct deaths.
And then 3.6 to 3.7 million indirect deaths from disease, malnutrition, infrastructure collapse caused by the wars.
Not a financial cost.
Estimated $8 trillion. Trillion with a T.
What does that huge toll really tell us about the long-term costs of conflict? Way beyond just military budgets.
Well, it just underscores the profound, often uncounted human suffering, doesn't it? These numbers show the devastating ripple effects on public health, on infrastructure, forcing people from their homes, destabilizing whole societies. The true cost of war is just astronomically higher than just the military spending line item.
And the U.S. established Guantanamo Bay.
Yes, the detention camp, leading to huge criticism over enhanced interrogation, which is a euphemism for torture and torture by proxy.
And still, very few convictions directly related to planning 9/11.
Really, only peripheral persons like Zacarias Moussaoui have been convicted in U.S. courts in connection with the attacks themselves. KSM and others are still held at Guantanamo.
Finally, let's touch on the persistent allegations about a potential Saudi government role. There's this document, File 17.
Right. File 17 is this FBI summary. It reportedly names 2 Saudi intelligence officials who allegedly provided significant support housing money to at least 2 hijackers after they arrived in the U.S.
And this is part of a bigger cache of documents that families have fought to get declassified.
Exactly. For years, it's central to the ongoing allegations.
And there was legislation, the Justice Against Sponsors of Terrorism Act, JASTA.
Passed in 2016, it allows victims' families to sue Saudi Arabia in U.S. courts. And there's an ongoing lawsuit based on that.
In the case of Omar al-Bayoumi.
Yeah, he was a Saudi national who hosted some hijackers in California, later identified as someone paid by Saudi intelligence, a co-optee. Though Saudi Arabia has always strongly denied any official involvement in 9/11.
So this deep dive into the sources, it really shows just how complex 9/11 was. The shock of the day, the ideologies behind it, the intelligence failures, the massive global shifts, and these long-term consequences we're still dealing with.
It reshaped everything, policy, society, countless lives.
Ultimately, looking back at all this source material, there's a question that just keeps coming up, at least for me, and maybe for you listening. Given how much intelligence seemed to be available before 9/11 and all the detailed reports afterwards about what went wrong, how do we make sure critical information actually gets shared and acted on today, without compromising civil liberties or falling back on some of those controversial tactics we talked about? It really invites you, our listener, to think about that ongoing tension, that balancing act between national security and individual freedom. It's a profound legacy of 9/11 that we're still debating, still shaping right now.